everyone, I'm Ian McCarthy of Lifting for Life and No Bullshit Bodybuilding, and today I'd like to talk to you about responding rationally to novelty. And I do first want to note that that title probably comes off as extremely pretentious. That was not the intent. Indeed, in thinking about the discussion that I wanted to have, that phrase came to mind and it really clicked, and I decided to roll with it despite the risk of giving that impression. So, to provide some additional context, earlier today I posted on Instagram and Facebook a video of me performing unloaded biceps flexion, which is literally biceps curls with no weight. And the reason why I did this is because this is actually something I've been including in my training recently. I think I spoke about it in last night's video. It's a component of my daily arms training. And the reason why I'm doing this is because there was a pilot study published by Jeremy Lenecke's group this year in which unloaded biceps flexion produced similar hypertrophy to moderately heavily loaded, if that's grammatically correct, training, admittedly in untrained individuals, but that's enough for the concept in my mind to be promising. So I thought, okay, here's something to try, recognizing all the confounders involved. At the very least, I can give it a shot, I'll have an understanding of what it feels like to do that, and then maybe I can get a vague sense of how this pans out in the real world for me as an advanced trainee. So, and I've talked about this a little bit on social media previously, and my thought was I'd be interested to film this so folks know what this actually looks like. And I was really surprised by the pushback. And initially my thought in making this video was, I considered even making it something like a call-out video in reference to the behavior of one individual, but I really quickly realized, and you can see that I'm getting really back in the groove of the content I used to put out, but I realized, man, I don't want to use someone's name, but it seems so much like clickbait. I'm really uninterested in that content, both as a producer and a consumer of it. It feels like kind of an easy way to go, cheap, etc., and I don't want to have a personal and negative and critical type discussion. I would rather turn it around and make it something hopefully wholly productive. So what I instead want to do is speak to how one more easily responds to new information, beliefs, worldviews, etc., and what the most common response is and the issues with that and how one can better respond. So I think in the case of most people, and I can't say that with the kind of confidence I would have in the case of expansive scientific research, but in my experience, the default response to really genuinely new information which seemed, provided it meets the standard of seeming odd or illegitimate, people typically go in one of two directions, or both, because they're not actually mutually exclusive. One is to be defensive, which is to say that which I already believe is better or true, superior to whatever's being presented. And the other is aggressiveness, saying, no, that's wrong, that's illegitimate, what are you talking about, that's absurd. And again, those can go together. So someone could come to you and say, I think almost everyone should go keto. And excuse me, I feel a very plausible response could be, high carb is superior for almost everyone and keto is shit. So, and that has the components of both the attack and the defense of what's already there. And I'll note that one could be technically correct in responding in that way, but I think there are two risks in using that general approach to discourse. One is the risk of simply mistreating other people, which I find to be a very valid consideration. There's a real issue of, are you going to be or be perceived as condescending, disrespectful? Do you want to be someone who talks down to other people? Let's even assume that this other person is actually wrong. Do you want to go in as someone who's going to immediately attack what they're saying and then defend your view, even if it's the correct view, as opposed to someone who's going to use a more subtle approach? You're certainly free to use that approach, but that's not the one I would encourage. And the second issue, which I think a lot of people would argue is more important, is that of unduly risking actually being wrong. In that, if you immediately go to attacking and defending, and really emotionally you're closed, because that's to a large extent going to dictate your behavior, closed off to whatever it is, then you're not going to assess it objectively, and thus you're risking not recognizing that your view is wrong if it actually is. So what I feel to be a better approach generally is one of a combination of skepticism and charity, which might seem to be somewhat in conflict, but I don't think they inherently are. Skepticism in that you don't want to simply assume that which is novel is new. Indeed, there is such a thing as a logical fallacy of arguing that something is superior purely on the basis of it being new. And you wouldn't want to say, I never heard this before, so it's got to be the case. Now, that strikes me as quite counterintuitive, but I also think that some people could fall for that. This is like the new training technique. This is the new supplement. This is the new dietary approach. And on some real level, they would simply assume, okay, this is the better option. This is the way to go. So skepticism, an appropriate level of skepticism, stops you from making that kind of mistake. What charity does is it allows you to, and I don't think there's really black and white here, one single, this is the perfect way to do this, but if you pull it off, what you avoid is making false assumptions about what someone thinks, what they have actually meant by what they've said, what the evidence is for what they've said, whether or not they have evidence, etc. And, false assumptions get people in a lot of trouble because they're not even reflective of what it is someone actually thinks. And I think that in being charitable and in putting what someone has said in the best light, etc., you're better able to recognize what they actually think, including all the nuances that come with it, and you're better able to reach agreement on the points you actually agree on and disagreement on what you disagree on, and you're better able to ultimately ascertain that which is true, which might even entail your pre-existing belief or viewpoint being false. And again, I think balancing those is ideal because it means you're not naive, you're not going to go in and be duped by someone, but you're also not going to railroad someone, even if inadvertently, into, well, they actually believe this and this is bullshit. And this all sidesteps if, again, done properly, it can sidestep the issue of attributing to people things they don't believe, etc. So, I feel that would, both on an individual level, I think that approach is beneficial, and on a community level, I think that if this were a philosophy toward discussion that were more widely accepted and practiced, the result would be, first of all, a lot of drama would be avoided, and that speaks to this emotional side, respect, etc. And even if you're someone who simply doesn't care very much about that, I think it would raise the level of knowledge and understanding in the community because people would be less prone to attaching to this and simply clinging to whatever is there and refusing to really seriously challenge it and absorb new information. So that's my viewpoint. Oh, something else I wanted to mention before we go. And this speaks to the issue of charity. This gets slightly more into the specific, like what does it mean? Okay, you're charitable. I understand the word. I know that it's in the dictionary. What do you mean in this context? I could really make a whole video about this, but to condense it down to one recommendation, I find that questions are incredibly valuable. And avoid so many of these issues I've discussed. Let's say this person, again, approaches you and they say, I think keto is the way to go. You think what they mean is, everyone should do keto, it's amazing, no one should eat carbs, or something like this. So one option would be to say, you think no one should eat carbs? That's really fucking stupid. Where are you getting this idea? But another option would be to say, okay, I get that that's your viewpoint. I'm a little bit unclear as to what that actually means. Could you expand upon that and tell me, do you mean no one should eat carbs, most people, less people should eat carbs? How strong or weak, how universal a claim is this really intended to be? And maybe they then say, yeah, you know what, I actually overstated what I meant. What I mean is, keto, I think it's a really good option for a lot of people, but like maybe not even a majority. And then notice that you have the ball rolling in the direction of a productive, respectful discussion, and you've avoided both the attack and being wrong about what it is they think. And maybe you end up at a point where you think that your pre-existing beliefs are correct, and indeed they're consistent with what this other person has said, which initially appeared inconsistent with your viewpoint, and you're only able to get there as a function of questions. So, something I really endeavor to do is when people, I don't want to make this seem like it's simply a passive-aggressive response to criticism or something like this, but when folks criticize my content or disagree with what I've said, I really try to default to, why do you think that, what is it you mean, etc., if there's really any genuine room to do that, which very often in my experience there is. So again, I feel that if this general approach were more widely adopted, we would have less drama, less fruitless drama, and more understanding, and I think it would raise the average level of knowledge in the community as well. So, that's my viewpoint. You're certainly free to ask me questions about it, and thank you so much for your time. See you next time.